These are actual sentences I heard this week, said to my face. Hey Christina, you look so tired. Why do you always look so tired? Also, do you know you have a big stain on your shirt? You're kind of a mess. Also, whoa, you're not making any sense, Christina. Are you a little drunk? No, I'm not drunk. I'm a mother. And it's just that sleep deprivation sometimes looks a lot like drunk. I am currently raising a teenager, a preteen, and a toddler, all at the same time, without any professional help, not even like a live-in therapist, which I could use. I used to be able to hold intelligent conversations. I used to be able to say something, and then the person would respond with, wow, that's a good point, Christina. I miss those days. Let me give you a visual. This is my brain before kids. This is my brain after kids. So if you run into me at the grocery store and I'm not wearing my pajamas and I don't have any Cheerios stuck to my face and I don't have crayons in my hair and I utter a cohesive sentence, I expect you to congratulate me. I want an applause. I want a cupcake. I prefer a full-on party, but I don't have the energy to party right now.
Well, welcome to the Ransom Church. If you did not guess by that clip, today we're going to talk about running on fumes in my parenting, okay? So I want to begin by getting a little bit of a baseline here. How many of you in the room are parents? Raise your hands. Even if you got grown kids, you're parents. Yeah. Okay, now this one's tricky. How many of you have parents? Raise your hand. Okay, a lot of hands didn't go up. I'm worried. I don't know what that means. But we all have parents, like we all came from somewhere. And so the point is this applies to all of us. So parents, our non-parents don't check out because we all interact with people around us. We're all influencing the people around us. So whether you're a parent or not, this stuff matters. But the reality is that parenting is not easy. This video is all too accurate. James Dobson says parenting is not for cowards. I agree with him. I think he hits it right on the mark. In fact, being a parent is one of the hardest jobs you can embrace. And as your kids get older, in some ways, it actually gets harder. Mark Twain, famous author, he sums it up well, gives some solid parenting advice. He wrote this one time: when kids are 13, put them in a barrel and nail the lid shut, then feed them through the knot hole. When they turn 16, plug the knot hole. The point being, parenting feels like that sometimes. It can be tough. It is extremely personal. It is incredibly demanding. Every parent wants to do their best. Every parent that engages the process, we want to do our best. We have great intentions, and yet how many of us, when it comes to our parenting, would say that most of the time, I feel like I'm running on fumes in my parenting. And then you read something like Psalm 127, verse 3, where it says, children are a gift from the Lord. They are a reward from Him. And if you're completely honest with yourself, you don't always feel that way. Now listen, I always love my kids. I'm always thankful I'm a parent. But there are just times, like it's hard. Being a parent is not like getting a puppy. You can't if they nip at you or pee on the carpet, you can't take them back. You're raising another human being. You're in this for life, and it can be incredibly humbling and frustrating and awesome. And here's something we all need to realize today. Parenting is the greatest form of leadership. It is the greatest form of leadership because at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. You're leading your children. Now, some days go really well. Other days you feel like you're trying to herd cats. It just doesn't work. And most parents understand my job's to lead my kids. What they don't always understand is where they're leading them. That there's an intentionality in what we're trying to accomplish in our parenting journey. And so if I asked what your goal was as a parent, I would get all kinds of answers. Some would say, I'm trying to get all my children to age 18 and no one blows up the house. That would be good. But usually it has something to do with I want to raise well-rounded, responsible adults. So whatever goal you set as a parent will affect who your children become. Whether you're a parent now, whether you're going to be a parent in the future, what you set as a goal of parenting matters. And so the question we're left with is, what should our goal as parents be? From a biblical perspective, if you want godly kids, what should the goal be? What's the end goal? And the answer is to transfer dependence. to transfer dependence. In other words, to get your kids to not need you for everything. When kids are little, they depend on you, they need you for everything. Over time, that changes. Now, here's what happens. They begin to become less and less dependent on us, and that happens just, you don't even have to try, that just happens. They become less dependent. What you have to do intentionally is, the goal is to transfer that dependence away from you and towards God. It will transfer away from you by accident. It will not transfer towards God without intentionality. The problem with this whole transferring dependence is a lot of parents don't like that idea because we don't want to let go. We like to hold on. And this is where it breaks down for a lot of parents. When we forget, they were never ours. They're God's. We were entrusted with our children. And if we choose to not intentionally transfer dependence to God, our kids will end up chasing independence anyway. They'll just chase it according to the world, not according to God's standards. That's what I want to talk about today. So turn to Deuteronomy chapter 6. If you're using one of our Bibles, we'll be on page 112. If you didn't bring a Bible, just raise your hand. The ushers are coming around. They'll hand you one. You can follow along. Let me give you some background context. Deuteronomy chapter 5, Moses is reiterating the Ten Commandments. He's laying out, here are the Ten Commandments that we need to live by. These are God's standards for living. And then he turns a corner at the beginning of chapter 6, and he speaks up and he shares a teaching on parenting in light of the Ten Commandments, in light of the standards we're to live by. He writes this in Deuteronomy chapter 6, starting with verse 1. He says, "These are the commands, decrees, and regulations that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you. You must obey them in the land you are about to enter and occupy, and you and your children and grandchildren must fear the Lord your God as long as you live." So Moses says to us, our job is to transfer dependence. As you teach your kids to fear the Lord, as you teach them to live according to Scripture, not only will they be changed, will you be changed, but you're actually affecting generations. You, as a parent, have the ability to shape the generations to come. Now, think about your parenting this morning. Anybody not feeling like a generation shaper? And how you got ready for church or whatever today? Parenting takes so much effort that far too many people see that far into the future as generation shapers because they're just struggling to stay afloat, or at least it feels that way. If any of these thoughts resonate with you, you might be running on fumes as a parent. Thoughts like, I'm alone in this. I'm the only one who cares. I'm exhausted. I'm the only one giving effort. None of my friends, my family don't understand. I'm exhausted. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, I can't keep up. Sometimes I feel like just shutting it all down and running away. I'm uninformed. Not really sure what's going on in my kids' lives. I don't know about, grades or fears or friendships. I don't know if they're seeing anybody. They don't let me into their life. I'm powerless. Man, I just feel completely out of control and helpless. I feel taken advantage of. I feel underappreciated. Anyone been part of that roller coaster? One or more of those? If you feel those, one moment you're so proud of your kids and you totally want to do the humble brag thing on Facebook, you know what I'm talking about? And the next moment you're like, who are your parents? Were you raised by wolves and you want to take Mark Twain's advice, put them in the barrel, And it goes back and forth. And what happens with so many people is more days than not, we don't know what to do. Some of us, if we're honest, we're afraid of the direction our kids are headed. If you get really, really honest, some of us, you're disappointed with your kids. You love them. You would never say it out loud, but if it's how you feel. There are things they do and you're actually disappointed. God wants to speak hope into your parenting journey. He wants you to know that he loves you, that he cares for you, that he loves your kids and cares for them, and he does not want you parenting on fumes. That's not his plan. So, what do? You can't give them back, you can't, there's no warranty on these things. You can't turn them in. And so he wants you to know there's some things that you can do as a parent to refuel your tank in practical ways. And by the way, the first one doesn't sound like parenting advice at all, but it's the most important piece of parenting advice anybody could ever give you, that if you do not have this one in place, no other parenting advice you get even matters. Okay? Number one, love God with all your heart. Love God with all your heart. Verse 4 and 5 of Deuteronomy chapter 6. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And this doesn't sound like parenting advice, but it is. Probably the worst news that any parent ever receives or ever realizes is the moment when they realize, my kids are going to do what I do, not do what I say. That's terrible news because they tend to do what they see in you rather than blindly follow your instructions, which means the more that you fall in love with God, the more they see a godly life modeled. You want your kids to catch you reading the Bible. You want your kids to catch you praying with each other as a couple, praying individually. You want your kids to see you serving, growing in a group. You want to model tithing for them. The things that you hope they will do someday, you want to model. The question is, what do you catch your kids doing? Or excuse me, what do your kids catch you doing? What do they catch you prioritizing? What do they catch you ignoring? What do they catch you investing in and valuing? What do they catch you overlooking? What do they catch you giving your time and your money to? The reason this says love God with all your heart, not with some, not with part, not with a fraction, is because of how it influences your children. But how many of us, isn't it fair to say most people love God with part of their heart? Is that fair? But here's the thing. One of the most dangerous things that we can do as parents is expose our kids to a little bit of God. Let me explain. We're in the middle of flu season. And I have 3 kids, so the doctor's always, pushing us to get the flu shot. I love my kids. I want to protect my kids. And there's always, as parents, you waver between I want to make sure they're healthy, have the right vaccinations, but what also do I want to inject in my child's body that I don't need to, and there's always that battle. Well, what they're doing when they actually give you a vaccine is they're actually giving you the live virus. They're giving you a little bit of it to keep you from getting the flu. They actually give you the flu, just a little bit, so your body can fight it off, and it makes you immune to the whole thing. My question is, are we making our kids immune to God? As parents, are we giving our kids just a little bit of God? And so this place, church, is the only place during the week that they encounter God. So they get a little bit of Bible, a little bit of prayer at church. It never becomes part of your family, your daily life, your routine. That may actually make them immune. It may actually inoculate them to the power and the glory and the majesty and the sovereignty of who God is. And so what happens is they end up growing up like a lot of people going to church, knowing about God, but never knowing God in a life-changing way. And if there's anything that makes the parenting journey tough, it's a kid that knows about God but does not know God. And so the call is to love God with all your heart so that you model that for your children. The problem is there's so much in life that distracts us. On behalf of our kids, as parents, you want to provide for your kids. You have good intentions. We always say things like, I want to give them a better life than I had, So you work hard, and you work long hours, and you pour into your career, and we fill our lives with more stuff until we're running on fumes, and so we wanted to have all the best opportunities, So we have them in, football and ballet and gymnastics and underwater basket weaving and competitive underwater basket weaving. And we organize their crazy schedules, and then we have to work harder because we got to pay for it all. And then, they got to have a car, and I got to save for that great education, so you work even harder. And you're burning yourself out and still not giving them the thing that they need most, which is a deeper relationship with God and a deeper relationship with you. And if we are not careful, we can see how easy it is to slip into we become child-centered parents instead of being God-centered parents. How many of us, our lives revolve around our kids instead of revolving around God? And so we have all the time in the world for, their weekend travel clubs and activities and all this and that, but no time in our lives to go to church, no time in our lives for God, and we certainly can't squeeze in a life group midweek. And how can we afford to tithe? How can we afford to do all these things? How can we attend one and serve one? I couldn't do that to my kids. I couldn't make them be at church 2 services. Seriously. And we think this doesn't affect our kids. It sends a significant message to our kids. What does it send to your kids? That you have all time for travel soccer club and no time for God. And then you expect them to grow up and go to church. How does that work? What was modeled for them? You say, well, how important is my involvement in church? And by involvement, by the way, I don't mean come late, leave before the offering, try to beat traffic, you're here once a month or so. That's not involvement. That's being a spectator at best. To be involved in your local church is to be immersed, is to participate in the body of Christ, to be deep in biblical community and involved in a life group and serving and giving and contributing to the family. And if you think it's not important and doesn't impact your kids, this isn't a parenting thing, think again. There was a study released by Promise Keepers and the Baptist Press that show when mom and dad are both active in church, and I mean active not once a month, active like what I just talked about, when they are engaged and active in church, 72% of their children stay active in church as an adult. if only mom is active, even if dad attends periodically, it drops to 15%. If both mom and dad are not active, which means, listen, if both mom and dad, even if they take kids to church, all growing up, like once a month or so, we make it in, once every 3 weeks we make it in, but they attend casually, but even if they take them to church, but they are not active in their local church, it drops to 6%. 6%. What does your life say about your love for God? I mean, if I could walk in your house, if I could be the fly on the wall in your house this afternoon, what would I say about your love for God if I looked at, the way you spend your time and the shows you watch, the music you listen to, and your internet history, and how you spend your time with or without your family, and how you spend your money and all these things? Because the reality is your home environment, that's where your kids live. Everything you do, they see. Everything you say, they hear. Every behavior you model, they will copy. So if you want godly kids, it should go without saying, you have to be godly parents. The best thing you can do for your children, the best thing you can do is love God with all your heart. That's where it starts. And once that foundation is laid, number 2, you need to lead your family. Look at verses 6 through 9. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road, when you are going to bed and when you're getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. In other words, if you don't lead your family, who will? Because I don't know if you know, this faith thing, it doesn't happen by accident. Faith cannot be something we just do on Sunday. It has to be part of who we are, what we model to our families, how we lead at home, and too often we just don't. Edward, Duke of Windsor, made this comment about the United States. He said, "The thing that impresses me most about America is the way the parents obey their children." Oh, burn, right? But he's totally right. Are you leading your kids or are they leading you? Because we need to lead our kids intentionally, knowing the end game. The end game is dependence on God. I'm transferring dependence to God. And then we need to make our decisions based on that, which, by the way, is completely countercultural. It might mean you limit the number of activities they're in. It might mean that you're intentional about family time together, eating around the dinner table. It might mean you're intentional about family devotions and getting in the Word together, praying together. It might mean you need to discipline your children. One of the greatest responsibilities as a parent is to teach our kids fear and awe of God, that He is who He says He is, and He'll do what He says He does. You want to know how to teach them that? Be who you say you are and do what you say you'll do. Because the world that they're living in daily will not automatically instill that in them. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6 is probably the most quoted verse on parenting ever. It says this: direct your children on the right path, and when they're older, they will not leave it. It's probably the most quoted passage. It's probably the most misquoted passage. Because often when this is taught, it's taught in this way. If you teach your kids the right thing, if you raise them in church, you teach them the right thing to do, they'll never stray from that. And many people feel like either I'm a complete failure or God's a total liar. Because I tried to do that and my kids still rebelled. The problem is that's not even an accurate translation. A more accurate translation is if you train a child up in their way, when they are old, they will not stray from it, which is actually a warning saying, listen, if you let your kid go whatever way they want to go without giving him any instruction young, it will be hard to ever get them back on the right path. Now that we see every day. In fact, the word direct in Hebrew here, to direct your children, literally means the palate of the mouth. And the picture comes from the Old Testament. When an Israelite woman would have a baby, the midwife would take her finger, dip it in this paste, put the paste on the palate of the baby's mouth, and it would initiate hunger, and the baby would want to nurse. What they're saying to us in this passage is, parents, that's your job. Your job is to initiate hunger for God in your kids, which looks different for every kid because every one of them is unique. And so the goal is to get to know your kid, to spend time with them, to know their personality, and to know how you can model Christ for them in a way that will initiate hunger in them. That's our call. Our call is to lead our kids towards Christ. You see, the church isn't meant to do what you were meant. The church can't do what you were meant to do. And I would go further. I would say Christian schools can't do what you were meant to do. Christian schools are amazing. They might be the right choice for your family. We have lots of Christian school families and administrators and staff that attend our church, but the staff and administration will be the first to say they can guide your kids. They cannot raise your kids. That's not their goal, okay? They can do the best to guide your kids, but they're there to partner with you in raising your kids. I'm so proud of our Ransom Kids ministry from 0 all the way up. Starting about the time they crawl or just a little later, they already have like little take-home papers and they're memorizing scripture and they're doing all that, and we're trying to do what we can with the time we have. And when your kids get a little older, you'll start noticing you get weekly or monthly, depending on their age, resources sent to your home through our Orange curriculum, and you get a weekly email or a monthly email. Or we even push that you can download the Parent Q app. And it'll partner with our curriculum and give you a weekly devotional thought and the things that you should consider throughout the week, the conversations you can be having with your kid. We do all that to try to partner with you to equip you as a family to lead your kids. But ultimately, you have to lead them. And having been a youth pastor for a lot of years, I had parents literally say to me all the time, well, it's your job to train my kids to know Jesus. No. It's my job to equip you to do your job, which is to raise your kids to know Jesus. Parents, it is your responsibility to lead your kids spiritually. You know why most don't do it? Because you're tired. I'm tired. I'm running on fumes. Which is why you need to love the Lord your God with all your heart. You need to reconnect with Him and let Him fill you so that you have the energy and the ability to teach your kids about Him. Listen, Ransom Church is not the most important thing I do. The most important thing I do with my life is not what I'm doing right now. We could build this church, we could build a great church, and I lose my kids, and I failed as a parent. There could be another pastor standing here, and this church could go on for a long, long time. But my kids, Trinity, Truett, Tucker, have one dad. And the most important thing I will ever do is disciple my children to know Jesus Christ. That's my job. I can't leave that to someone else. I need to lead them to the one who gave his life for them. Which leads to the next thought. Lay down some boundaries. Now, nobody likes the sound of that because they're difficult, but boundaries are everywhere and society can't function without them. Even the gas gauge in your car is a boundary, When it says E, if you don't respect that boundary, you'll run out of fuel. In the same way, your family needs boundaries. Believe it or not, your kids actually want them. They don't even know they want them, but they want them. That's why they rebel. Rebellion is nothing but kids looking for boundaries. Where's the fence? Because the fence brings them freedom. And if you try to parent without them, you will run dry. Proverbs 22:15 says this, a youngster's heart is filled with foolishness, but physical discipline will drive it far away. I know every kid in here just loves that verse. Now, am I saying everyone should spank their kids? No. That's a parenting decision you have to make. What I am saying is there's a place for discipline, and the key is knowing what stage your kids are in. Now, this is just, I'm going to give you a very general picture, and this is it really depends on the kid, and it varies a lot, but basically from 0 to 1, all you got to do is keep them alive, right? I mean, they eat, sleep, poop, and you just keep them alive. That's it. But from 1 to 5, roughly 1 to 5, your children need discipline. They need boundaries, they need safety, they need all of that. Age 5 to 12, roughly, what you're going to start noticing is you begin to shift from discipline to more training and instruction. I mean, you still discipline, that's still happening, but now you're teaching them through discipline to respect authority, and you're teaching them how to interact with other human beings on the planet and things like that. Then roughly age 12 to 18, it moves to more of a coaching role. You start to lose power over them, particularly when your son gets bigger than you. And but you still have rules, you still have discipline, there's all of that, but more and more you're trying to coach them to learn to make the right choices, to learn to depend on God, to learn to turn to them. And these are just general, and it's different for every kid, but the problem is when these are ignored. If parents do not engage their kids early and set boundaries for behavior, and then they try to come back at 15 and for the very first time discipline them, they're in a lot of trouble because they don't have any influence with them. They never laid the foundation for leading their kids. The most loving thing that a parent can do for kids is set boundaries early, explain them clearly, and hold your kids to them. Now, you might be going, it's too late. It's never too late, okay? While your kid, even as an adult child, you can still engage that child in a relationship, you just got to understand what stage they're in, and you got to understand there are boundaries that child in your home needs, and you got to figure out how to get there. So for a little more parenting advice, let's go to our friend Christina again.
All three of my kids are mad at me right now for like completely different, unrelated reasons. All three are mad at me right now. For those of you who struggle with math, that means that 100% of my children are angry with me right now. And you know what? I don't care. I don't care. You know why? Because I am not their buddy. I am their parent. They are angry at me because I parented them. My number one job as their parent is to love them. And loving them does not mean making sure they're always happy and get every single little thing they want. Loving them means raising them into healthy, decent human beings who I would actually want to hang out with someday. That's what loving them means. Until my kids are adults, I am not their friend. We are not on the same level. I'm the authority. My child's well-being is more important to me than my child's opinion of me. My job is not to be liked by my kid, and I don't take it personally when my kid doesn't like me. And honestly, if my kids like me 100% of the time, I'm probably failing at parenting. So listen, parents. I know this parenting thing is really, 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 really hard. I know. And I know you're trying to do the right thing, and you're trying to be strict when it's necessary, and then your child gets upset at you, and then you give in. Don't do that. Don't give in. Hold your ground. And I hear some of you parents say things like, oh, my little kid is my best friend. That sounds really cute and all, but let's just be honest. If you're like 30, 40 something, and your best friend is an 8-year-old, like that's just weird. That's weird. Don't be so insecure and desperate for your kid to always like you. Parent your child and then find friends your own age. Now here's the good news. If you're trying to do the right thing and parent your children, them not liking you is not terminal. It's not going to last forever. You know what's terminal? Them turning into entitled, bratty adults the rest of the world now has to deal with. That's terminal. But them not liking you, that's not going to last forever. And I have some more good news. At least one brand of ice cream at your grocery store right now is on sale. So go get it.
Now that's actually oddly close to scriptural. Let me tell you what I mean. Proverbs 13:24, those who love their children care enough to discipline them. Proverbs 19:18, discipline your children while there is hope. Otherwise, you will ruin their lives. Too many parents don't do this one well because we are exhausted, we are tired, and so we let things happen that we never should have allowed. And we need to reset the boundaries for our kids. We need to reset the boundaries for our kids. Listen, the exhaustion of parenting our kids does not come from the boundaries that we set. It comes from the lives that our kids live when we don't set boundaries. Which leads us to number 4, you need to lean into your spouse. Single parents, you know how hard it is, right? The reality is no one should have to parent alone, and those who do are absolute champions in my mind. I don't know how, you're just champions. But when you are married, it takes teamwork because when mom and dad are both in the picture, but they are not both on the same page, it creates chaos. And if parents feel that they are pit against each other, or if one parent takes the easy way out and just starts playing the role of the spectator or the buddy or the friend, teamwork breaks down and the family is affected. But when your kids see that you are committed to one another, that you are unified, that you are speaking with one voice, and you have the same values, number 1, it's going to tick them off. And number 2, it's going to bring about an unbelievable sense of stability and security for them. Parents, if you're married, one of the best things that you can do is renew your commitment to your spouse. And maybe you need to go back and listen to last week's message again in order to be ready to parent together. Now, we need to wrap up, so we're going to turn it over to the campus pastors so we can celebrate communion. But before we do, let me take you back to the scripture we began with, and hopefully you hear it now with different ears. Psalm 127, verse 3. Children are a gift from the Lord. They are a reward from Him.